It's a little after 9, so if I can get everybody to take their seats, we can get started. It's on now. Let me make sure I've got the right thing. There you go. So welcome. I'd like to take care of some housekeeping before we get started. For those here in person, restrooms are out these back doors and either to the left or to the right near the elevators. If you need Wi-Fi, please let us know. We can help you get access to that. Sorry, I did not get around to printing the directions this year. Another thing is, if you notice in the back of the room, we have some posters set up. Those will be up throughout the day. We invite you to take a look. 3 of them are the trainees' abstracts for their proposed projects. Please take a look, and there's notepads next to them, and you can kind of start a dialogue and write comments or feedback to them there. And then we also over by the catering table have the annual meeting poster for our program that highlights some of the cohort 1 experiences with their Headwaters field trip along the Nueces River, and then their partner workshop last year and project abstracts that they developed over the summer. So today we're going to start with welcome and introductions. And so I just want to go over the purpose of the program a little bit. So this is a National Science Foundation funded research traineeship, or NRT for short. It's for TAMUCC graduate students, and it's called STAGES. That stands for Stakeholder Guided Environmental Science. The goals of this workshop today are threefold. First, or I should say of our workshops as a whole, because we did start with some mini workshops where the stakeholders came and presented to the trainees first. But we want to connect our students with our stakeholders and community partners. And we want to generate a list of big data oriented problems that then the trainees, faculty, and community partners work together to co-develop research questions that are of interest to the partners that the trainees may work on for the next 5 to 6 months. Dr. Merlet, would you like to say a little bit about the program?
I think we covered a lot during our presentations at the beginning, but what I would like to say is to introduce the group, the program leaders, and that is myself, Dr. Liu, atmospheric science professor, Dr. Zhu, and ocean chemical oceanographer, Dr. Jenny Pollack. Jane, how do you define your marine ecologist? I'm sorry. And we don't have Dr. Philippe Dussault, who's our artificial intelligence guru, right? Machine learning, which is driving, it's the drive behind this program. So where this NRT, the National Science Foundation Research Traineeship funded project comes from, it's part of harnessing data revolution, okay, HDR program, and that we're using that to try to help solve more complicated issues, right? That we know we're dealing with today, the environmental issues that we thought we can understand, but we now learn there's so much more that we can add to. It's just to understand what drives, for instance, freshwater flows, what drives the bacteria along the coast. So what we're trying to do, and what's unique about this program, is that we're trying to connect our fellows, our student fellows, with stakeholders or community partners. And by the way, that stakeholder guided environmental science term, we are trying to change that to where we are including, we say, all relevant community partners, not just those that have a stake, right? It's everybody. So connecting them to make sure we understand what the priorities are, what the needs are. Yes, and then we come in with our group work and support, and that's all this program is about. Also, the fellows working together, getting familiar with each other's field and seeing how they can merge their experiences to come up with better solutions. So, long story short, I'm gonna give it back to Audrey, but I really appreciate everybody being here. It's been a great second cohort experience, I think, and we thank our partners for joining us along the way this year and presenting and introducing their, whatever interests they have and whatever data they have available. So we can make a better decision in what we can do going forward.
So with that, we'd like to start to go around the room, as well as those of you joining us remotely, and give introductions. What you see right now is a list of this year's community partners. And these are partners that have presented to our trainees on who they are, what their interests are, or their needs are, or even have done professional development seminars with our trainees. So if you have something that you're passionate about, that applies in the area of professional development, please let us know, because that is an aspect of the traineeship for our students. I'd also like to point out that if you notice, our community partners range from federal to state agencies, to local NGOs and nonprofits. So we're trying to develop a diverse group of partners for our faculty and students to work with, and we'd like to continue this on into the future too. So to start the introductions, the representatives from this year's community partners that are in the room, if you could stand up and give us, a short introduction to yourself, we would appreciate that. So Patrick, if you could get us started.
Yes, Patrick Vaughn, Michigan Southern today, Coastal Watch Association. And a lot of science-based information, industrial expansion. We look at air quality, water quality. We look at just how our ocean is doing right there, because that is the beginning of the Gulf of Mexico feeding the Bay. We're seeing a lot of stuff happening, and I appreciate y'all allowing us to be here today. I'm co-founder and president of that organization, and with me is Peyton.
Yeah, Peyton Campbell. I'm the air and water monitoring coordinator for Southern Vegas.
James is behind you.
Hi, Jim Toll from Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Been a research scientist for 26 years now, and it's been a pleasure working with you guys, and I will be officially retired at the next month. So it's been a highlight. Many things I've done in my career, but it's been a real pleasure working with you guys. So.
And then online, Evan.
Hi, everybody. So, there we go. So I'm Evan Turner. I work at the Texas Water Development Board. I was a previous alumni twice over at A&M Corpus Christi, so I really believe in what this group is doing. I'm sorry I can't be in person today. We have a major contract deadline that randomly showed up today, so I've got to sort of be on call for that. But I'm really interested to see your work and talk with y'all. And maybe Audrey, if you can, take a cell phone picture of those posters and just send it to me. I think it might be easier than trying to do something crazy with the online stuff, because I'm really interested in what the students have presented.
Will do. John, Quinlan?
Okay, sorry, it took me a second to find a mute button. John Quinlan, I'm with the Southeast Fishery Science Center, based out of Miami. I work with something called the Advanced Technology Branch. We're beginning to spin up AI, image analysis, a bunch of different things in this branch just, fairly recently, within the last year or so. So there are applications that we're pursuing. Yeah, I spent a long time working on the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shelby? Okay, Shelby may have stepped out briefly. Christian?
Morning, everybody. I'm Christian Jones. I work with John Quinlan at the NOAA Fisheries Southeast Fisheries Science Center. I am with our Population and Ecosystem Monitoring Division, and I work in our Oceanic and Coastal Pelagics branch. I do a couple of things here. I'm our Uncrewed Systems Project Coordinator, program lead, but I also work with our partners at the Southeast Regional Office on ANTO-related tagging, movement studies, and that type of stuff.
And Jason, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning. My name is Jason Finchback. I work at the Texas General Land Office, Water Resources Manager and Coastal Resources Division. Doing all things water quality for the agency. That includes Texas Beach Watch, the Texas Coastal Ocean Observation Network with TCOON, the Coastal Non-Point Source Program, and the Public Engagement Program, Clean Coast Texas. And then anything else that pops up. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Next, our trainees will just give very short introductions to themselves. As part of their presentations, they will provide more information, but if you can just name, degree. So Ifani, or sorry, Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Gerard. I'm a PhD student in the Coastal and Marine System Sciences program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin. I'm also a PhD student in the Coastal Marine Systems Science.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Button. I'm a master's student in the Coastal Marine System Science program.
My name is Quincy. I'm a master's student in the Coastal Marine Systems Science program. Hello, my name is Remy LeBay. I am a master's student in the chemistry program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. Well, I'm a first year student in the CMSS program.
My name is Amanda Burton and I'm a first year chemistry master's student.
Hi everyone, my name is Mahima. I'm a first year master's student in the MARC program.
Hi everyone, my name is Vita Bona and I am a fourth year PhD student in the marine biology program. And I won't be presenting today. I was part of cohort 1 last year, so I'm the peer mentor for this year.
Yeah, Mohammed, you go ahead.
My name is Ahmed, PhD student in the Marine Systems.
Participating in some of the elements.
Okay. And then next, I'd like our TAMUCC faculty to introduce themselves. So in some of the faculty in the room are the Stages executive team. Some are instructors for the Big Data Blitz over the summer. And then some are the faculty advisors to the student. So.
Good morning, everyone. Patrick Morgan, Associate Professor in Physical and Environmental Sciences. My areas of interest are in seagrass genetics and chemistry and metabolics.
Blair Sturba Boatwright, Emeritus Professor of Mathematics and Statistics. I do statistics. I don't do statistics.
All right, Chin Dalio, I'm the professor in atmospheric science. I pretty much teach most of the students how to code in Python, or help them to enhance their skills. And help more in the summer.
Jenny, go ahead.
Go ahead and introduce myself.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jenny Pollack. I am the chair for coastal conservation and restoration at our research institute and one of the executive team members for energy.
So I actually do work on also on this team of exactly the members for the project. I'm the chair of ecosystem science and modeling in the Progressive Institute, also professor of chemistry in
My name is Sia. I will be your instructor for 1 week. I will teach numerical part of machine learning and data science. Then we're also joined today by a couple of members from our administration team. I'm Christina Lofton with the Office of Research and Innovation, and specifically with student research and innovation. Hello everyone, my name is Zoya Nagmani. I'm a postdoctoral research associate and I'm working at Dr. Mobila's lab. Nice to meet you all.
Process of putting this program together, without everyone's every week meeting for a summer. When we were talking through this proposal and what it could be and what it should be, that was what we thought it should be. I think we're changing some things from what we thought it was going to work, but now the work is on you, the trainees and the partners, but there was a lot of commitment and passion from the team that put together this proposal. So I would like to acknowledge that. Everybody, thank you.
And then we're joined online by Dr. Ahmed.
Everyone, my name is Mohammed Ahmed. I'm Associate Professor of Geophysics and also a member of Center for Water Supply Studies at Texas A&M University here, Corpus Christi.
Okay. So the charge for today is that the trainees will first in the morning give project prospectus presentations. So these will provide an outline of their project topics and timelines to facilitate further discussion and refinement of those co-developed research questions. Some of that discussion will happen immediately afterwards. We're going to have full room discussion. And then in the afternoon, we're having breakout discussions. Then these we hope will be detailed discussions of data availability and access and development of communication plans between the partners and the trainees. So our next agenda item is Dr. Naramani is going to give us a talk that is loosely an introduction to AI and machine learning applications.
Before she starts, I would just like to say a few words about her. She joined our lab last year. After she got a PhD in her research was using machine learning and artificial intelligence to understand flooding and wetland
Yeah, wetland health assessment.
processes. So she has a strong background in computation. And she will be one of the instructors this summer for the data leads and teaching the environmental forecasting in fall, where our trainees will finalize their projects. So just wanted to offer a little bit of background. And this presentation, please feel free to ask questions at any time as she goes through. It's supposed to be an interactive presentation, not just a talking to you presentation.
Thank you, Audrey. What?
Hello, everyone. My name is Royan Arimani. I'm a postdoctoral research associate with CWSS, and I'm working at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. Since September 2023, I've been working at Dr. Morgolet's lab, focusing on how artificial intelligence and environmental sciences intersect. Today, I'm so excited to discuss a topic that is both timely and significant, the evaluation and prospects of artificial intelligence in environmental sciences. Please feel free to ask any questions or raise any concerns you have. I would like to have your valuable comments also. Let's go ahead and talk about artificial intelligence, which is changing how we solve environmental problems, providing new solutions and insights we couldn't have imagined before. So let's see how AI is changing environmental sciences and the exciting future it offers for understanding and protecting nature. Okay. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is when machines or software show intelligence. It is also the field that studies how to make computers and software smart. In computer science, artificial intelligence, also called machine intelligence, refers to the intelligence demonstrated by machines as opposite to the natural intelligence exhibited by humans. Okay, leading AI textbooks define the field as the study of intelligent agents. Any device that perceives its environment and takes action that maximize its chance of successfully achieving its goals. In informal conversation, the term of artificial intelligence is often used to describe machines or computers that mimic cognitive, right? Cognitive functions that humans associate with the human mind, such as learning and problem solving. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what are the key principles and techniques behind AI functioning. According to the figure here, you can see that by David John and Amy McGovern, deep learning is a subset of both machine learning and also artificial intelligence. So deep learning is a method of AI that teaches computer to process the data in a way that is inspired by human brain, right? So deep learning model can recognize complex patterns in pictures, text, images, or many types of data set we have to produce accurate insights and predictions. Here you can see the neurons in the human brain, right? So this is related to the fundamental components of artificial neural networks. These neurons collaborate in layers to process input set to produce output, right? Like the neurons in human brain. So neurons are the basic building blocks of ANNs, or artificial neural networks. And they work together in a layer to process input and produce output. Okay, here in this figure, you can see that we have 3 layers. The first layer is input set, and the second layer is hidden layers. We call hidden layers, and the last one is output layer. Okay, the input layer receives the initial data you have, such as some images, text, or some different types of data, like you have your data set in some Excel files or whatever, okay? And then it passes this data set, I have to be here, okay? It passes to the next layer, okay? The next layer is our hidden layer. Each neuron in the input set, input layers presents your feature of your input set, right? And the hidden layer performs the computation on the, sorry. This is hidden layers, right? This is your input layers, your data set. You just enter to the hidden layers, right? In the hidden layers, just perform computation on the input set and use some weights and biases. Each neurons in the hidden layers takes inputs from the previous layers and then applies some weights and then add some biases terms and apply on activation function. And finally, you have your output set. Okay, so in summary, deep learning algorithms are the neural networks that are modeled after the human brain. So for example, a human brain contains millions of neurons, right? And that are interconnected together and work together to learn and process the information, right? Similarly, these deep learning neural networks, or we can say that artificial neural networks, are made of many layers. Here we call them nodes, not neurons, nodes. They all work together. We can give our output and get the output, our input and get the outputs, right? Okay, artificial neurons are software which called nodes, and we use mathematical calculations to process the data set, right? And ANN are just deep learning algorithms that uses these nodes to solve the complex problems we have. Let's assume that you have some input set, like here, for example, temperature, wind speed, or precipitation, or whatever you have. We put them here into the model, and model gives it some weights and add biases and activation functions, and then give you some outputs. We do not have enough information here about the hidden layer because it is like a black box model. So you the process of running your model again and again to get the best output you need based on your problems, right? All right. Okay. I'm going to talk about optimizing environmental data analysis from collection and pre-processing to advanced modeling. Okay, our work always involves two main steps that are so important. The first one is data pre-processing, and the second one is model building. The initial and crucial steps is data pre-processing. After you collecting your data set, we address some missing values, noisy data, and remove irrelevant images or text or data set you have, and which are unsuitable for your model, right? Sometimes you have some blurry images with some cloud covers. You cannot use them in your model because we need to have the good performance model to use for our problems, right? So following data set pre-processing, we can run the model and experiment with various models based on the problem at hand. So when we just iterate on the process to enhance the model performance, we can apply some transformation or decomposition techniques when you got not good results in your data set. So here you can see, for example, we have some different types of data. This is a study, this is one of my publications here, which is about just multivariate decomposition ensemble model for estimating long-term rainfall dynamics. Here it started with pre-processing the data set, and I added some decomposition techniques here to get the best data by using different types of hybrid models. We have it here. And here you can see we use CNN algorithm for just rainfall prediction by using some images from the clouds. So here you can see one of our models, which is so popular nowadays, random forest, that you can use it based on your problem. Okay. Okay, in this slide, I provided more details about my current project at TAMUCC. Here, water quality and groundwater level samples were collected by students at Dr. Morgales' lab for 12 wells in Galveston and Brazoria counties. Then I just added some more data set like stream flow, like precipitation from that GPM radar and other types of data to just increase the performance of my model. So okay, we have two different objectives here in this project. The first one is predicting groundwater level by using our samples and also the other types of data set I downloaded before. And the next one is about using septic system data, using bacteria data set to predict the level of bacteria in Gulf Coast. So here, it is evident that our data set here are not correlated together and exhibit so complex and also fluctuating patterns you can see from my data set here. And before selecting the model and suitable, we need suitable data set, and we need to determine if our data set are stationary or non-stationary before selecting any suitable models for your predictions, right? So some models, because some models are just perform better with stationary data set, and some of them are not. So what is the meaning of non-stationary data set? Non-stationary time series is considered, a time series is considered as non-stationary when statistical properties are not constant. For example, we do not have constant mean or constant, for example, constant patterns. We have different types of, for example, trend, seasonality we have. Also, we have different pattern in our data set. But in a stationary data set, we have constant mean, constant autocorrelation, and constant variance. So before selecting your models, you should know about your data set first before selecting your models. For example, in ARIMA model always use a stationary data set. So if you just give this model some non-stationary data set, you're not gonna get the best results for your predictions, right? So it is so important. Okay, the selected model will be trained using the pre-processed data set we have, and we can test it based on specific problems we have. So this is some different types of machine learning algorithms we have here. Based on your data set and your problems, you can select one of these machine learning algorithms to train your data set. In this figure, you can see I just train and I plot actual versus predicted values we have here. And this figure, you can see that we just decompose our data set into different types of pattern to just improve the performance of our model. Okay, as far as I know, we have 3 groups of students here interested in working on 3 projects in different organizations. The first one is coastal bend estuaries. This project focuses on improving the management and planning of wetland areas along the Texas coast to enhance their roles in important shorebird migration. And the goal is to encourage landowners to help make the Texas coast an important resting place for migrating shorebirds. The next one is NOAA Fisheries Project. This project aims to develop an AI or machine learning program to identify manta rays from satellite imagery. This identification is essential for supporting NOAA fisheries efforts in conservation and also reducing bycatch. The third one is TGLO project, which addresses the increasing level of bacteria in drinking water and seeks to identify the sources of contamination. Understanding these sources is crucial for developing strategies to ensure the safety and quality of drinking water. These projects share a common approach, right? Using machine learning techniques or AI. So here, our first steps involve collecting suitable data set we need related to each project's specific problem. The next one should be pre-processing the data set and also mining them to ensure they are suitable for our selected model. The subsequent step is also selecting an appropriate model, which could include statistical models, deep learning, or machine learning algorithms. The final steps also includes model validation and improvement and decision-making based on the results. So, okay, these projects will be further explained by students covering all the details here after my presentation. So let's proceed and watch their presentation here. And thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions or any comments, I'm happy to answer.
I just want to make a clarification. The bacteria project is in regards to the clean coast. So not drinking water is for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
But the students will go over into that detail.
Yes, yes.
Communication. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am. Any questions?
Okay. So if there aren't any questions, our first group to present is what we're calling the Giant Manta Ray group.
Hello, everyone. The name of our project is Monitoring Rays for Improved NOAA Enforcement. We're calling it Marine. Our group members are me, Amanda Burton, Remy Lebay, and Mahima Yogesh. Our primary community member is NOAA Fisheries Species Conservation Branch of the Southeast region. And our secondary community partners are Coastal Bend Basin Estuaries and the National Wildlife Federation. Like I said, my name is Amanda Burton. I go by Mandy. I'm getting a master's in chemistry. My advisor is Dr. Patrick Larkin, who's back there. And I'm going to be studying alkalinity and groundwater flux in seagrass meadows, as well as the genetic diversity of seagrass in those beds.
Hello, my name is Remy Lebay. I'm also a chemistry master's student here at TAMUCC. My advisor is Dr. Faraka Seaman. My research interests are in environmental toxicology and trying to understand how the environment and toxicants interact with organisms at the molecular level. And so I employ biotechnology methods and computational chemistry methods to explore the link and the relationship between those two.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mahima Yogesh. As I mentioned before, I'm a first-year master's student studying marine biology here at TAMUCC. My advisor is Dr. Yajwan Lin. My research in particular focuses on marine microbiology within the region of the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm looking to characterize diazotroph ecology and cyanobacterial ecology, and I'm hoping to be able to do that by utilizing molecular techniques and combining that with bioinformatics. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and dive into our research objectives for this project. So the first one is to create an artificial intelligence or machine learning model that will positively identify manta rays from satellite imagery that we will already have at our disposal. The second one is to kind of build upon existing predictive models of manta ray distribution. So we have some models. The picture at the top kind of outlines manta ray distribution in the Gulf of Mexico and across the Florida coast. And so we're hoping that whatever we find with our model and our data pipeline will kind of build upon this. And then as a result of what we're creating, we're hoping will decrease instances of bycatch. So yeah.
As far as available data sets go, Normandu Associates has a model that identifies oceanic anomalies. So that's anything that's like not a wave or a cloud cover of anything larger than a buoy. There are previous models for identifying other species, usually keystone species such as right whales and sea turtles. So at the very least, we know that it is possible and we can possibly use them as examples if we get stuck on anything. We have tracking data from NOAA. They have they said about a dozen or so tagged manta rays, so we can see where they were and see if we can see an image of them to feed that into the model later. Aerial photographs as well for the same reason, as well as confirmed sightings. And Maxar has a partnership with NOAA. They have access to all of their unclassified satellite images that we hope to use to look for them.
And so the pipeline that we're proposing to build is one that takes in those Maxar satellite images and then has a filter for the oceanic conditions. So if the images are not of good sufficient quality for the AI model to analyze, we'll filter those images out. And then we have a AI image analysis model that has been trained for the manta ray detection from the satellite images. And so it will be able to detect those manta rays within the image and then build a large data set containing satellite imagery of manta rays for then scientific exploration or conservational efforts. Oh, right. All right, so the algorithm that we'll be using is called You Only Look Once, or YOLO. It is an algorithm that is that was designed in Maine and it's free accessible through Ultralytics. You Only Look Once, or YOLO, is a image analysis tool. So it's specifically for images, and they can be a number of tasks that you can get YOLO to do. So you can do classification, detection, segmentation, tracking, and pose. Here, because we're interested in detecting a specific structure or specifically manta rays, we'll be using the detect training model. And so in order to do this, we need to put in data in order to train the data in order to train this YOLO algorithm. The data that we'll be putting in is one of known identified manta rays from satellite imagery with some blank images. So hopefully we're shooting for about 200 plus images, ideally for a decent model. And so after we have acquisition of these big data set, we then train the model in Python. And then after detection training of YOLO, we then do validation, make sure that we are hitting a threshold of at least 95% confidence of manta ray identification. And then we implement that model into the pipeline that I was discussing previously. For the training data set, there are two proposed methods that we can use to acquire those training data sets of the images of manta rays. First is the tracking of the manta rays. So if we know their X, Y position, as well as their relative depth, we can then narrow down tens of thousands of images to a couple hundred, hopefully, and then by hand look for those manta rays. And we hope to get trained in that if possible. Second method, which has been proposed, is using aerial images of manta rays on the surface. And then we take those images and then decrease the resolution to that comparable to the satellite imagery that we could get, so that we can then have an AI training model, the images sufficient for our AI training model.
As far as the feasibility of our plan and our plan itself, so the plan to train the model is to find the satellite images from Maxar, data sets we'll have access to with manta rays using the tag location data, confirmed sighting, and or the predictive model NOAA already has that was shown in that little map. So we'll then feed these images into the YOLO to train the AI ML model to identify the manta rays from the satellite images. For the code, we have kind of a rough outline. You never know what you're getting into until you get into it. But first, we want to eliminate any images with too much disturbance. Like if it's too cloudy, that's just going to take up time and space on the code. We don't need it. We can throw it out. Then isolate images with anomalies using that Normandy code, and then identify the images with manta rays.
And also, as an addition to this, we will all be kind of trying to complete the micro-credential programs that TAMUCC offers to bolster our skills in Python, just so we can kind of be on the same page and be ready for the summer class that we will all be taking. So lastly, when we discuss the applicability of marine, there's a couple of different things we hope to gain from this. The first one is an output of spatial and temporal data, and that being in like an all-encompassing data set. And with that data, we're hoping to kind of further advance the knowledge of giant manta rays population distributions and migratory behaviors, especially because these are considered at-risk species, and so really want to endeavor to know more about them. And once we have this information on the policy and conservation side of things, we're hoping to kind of feed that information and give that to people higher up who have the capability to make positive change. And then because this is something that is still considered, I guess, relatively new, we're hoping that we can kind of set a baseline for studying other marine species. So we wanted to thank the STAGES program and NSF for providing us with the funding to carry out this project. We want to thank our partners with NOAA and our secondary stakeholders of CBEP and the NWF as we kind of look forward to any feedback they'll provide us. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions. Thank you. Yes.
I may not have caught the details correctly, but Remy, I think you were saying something about the number of images you, at one stage early on, you talked about the number of images you hope to use. And then you said you wanted to be 95% accurate on those, is that correct?
Yeah, so I want the model to give out an output of 95% accuracy. And this is calculated based on the YOLO algorithm. It gives you that data after validation. Yes.
Okay. I'll just say off the top of my head, a couple hundred images strike me as enough to really verify 95%, but I could be wrong.
That's based on my experience with microplastics. So I have a student in, well, I work with somebody in my lab who's trying to identify macroplastics, and we try to do this with the YOLO, and it seems like about 250 images is enough, and it looks, and this is a guess, I don't, this is going to be flexible, of course, yeah, so that's why I floated that number around.
Great presentation. Can you talk a little bit more about how you validate the YOLO images as being accurate?
Yeah, so after the training, oh, yes, sorry. Okay, so after the training, you then either have additional data with the manta rays, and you have it try to identify those manta rays, and you label the manta ray in a separate file. Once it analyzes the images, then you give it the answer, and then based on its ability to correctly identify the manta rays, you get a percentage or a validation of the model. Yeah.
So it's outside of the set that will be evaluated for the project, is that right?
Yes. But you can also include that set as well, but that's probably not the best approach. Yeah. Okay.
I guess, but so thank you for explaining that. I think where I was headed was, is there like a ground truth thing that you will be doing to be able to detect whether or not, I mean, is that, I guess, maybe that's what you just explained. I'm sort of wondering, like the set that comes out for your project, are you looking at it and saying like, yes, that is a mantra, I know that's not right? Or is it not possible for you to just physically go through the 250 images?
So the purpose is for the training, we have to, yeah, like you said, manually identify them. But after that, when we get the satellite data set, there are tens of thousands of images. And so the hopes is that we then employ this AI model to then automatically run through images that are from the past and in the future, so that we have a better accounting for the manta rays in our oceans.
Were you asking about actual field ground observations? No, because they do have it, but NOAA, right, from the NOAA side, they did confirm some of those. How many confirmed?
So confirmed not from satellite images, there's around 5,000 from satellite images. They said a couple dozen.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. Honestly, I'm just thinking of translating, for example, the work that we do at the microscope. So if we're training somebody to identify organisms at the microscope, we want to demonstrate that there's inter-reader agreement on what this organism is. And it seems like in the same way you want to do that with your data, but it sounds like you're doing that with separate training set. Is that correct?
Yeah, ideally you would want a separate training set, but if you don't have enough images, you can use that training set again, but that's not the best practice. Yeah.
My question is about the resolution. Satellite is get because you need a very high resolution satellite image to be able to do that. Then that also leads to my second question. The data set will be huge, and do you have computer to deal with? And for training, and the image you cut to the center to the target, that's easy. But once you get a normal satellite image, because when there is not really happen all the time, probably 99.9% of the satellite image doesn't happen. And so how can you zoom it in, apply your models to pick those up? And that's my concern, because you need a huge data computer source to be able to identify.
From my understanding, at least, like, we do anticipate that it is going to be a large data set, just like you said. We're hoping to use something like the HPLC. I don't know if that completely answers your question, to at least have a more viable way to access such a large chunk of data. So that's one thing that we're looking into. Does that answer your question, Dr. Liu, part of it? Okay.
I hope you will have the computer resource to be able to understand that. Yeah.
Touched on the very question I was going to bring up. It had to do with more biology than machine learning. What's the depth resolution you can conceive for these satellite images? And I think of the Gulf of Mexico especially, and when this is it's pretty very low. And the biology of the manta ray is not on the surface all the time. So I'm just curious, from linking together the biology side and the machine learning side, it's going to take a lot of images to spot. And for sure, that's a manta ray, or is it a big capsule starting floating on the surface?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were thinking that same thing too, but in the presentation NOAA gave to us, they said that they looked at an area where they were told there was a manta ray in the area, and they looked and they saw 201 hour over all of their satellite images. And they also have a couple confirmed satellite images to help train the AI to make up for the fact that it's going to be blurry. It's going to probably mostly go off of size, then shape, then some other markers, but I think the machine learning does pretty much that when you train it. And as for the amount of pictures, that's why we're going to try to first eliminate all the stuff with too much disturbance, and then run the Normandy code, get rid of everything that doesn't have something there, and then we'll have a much more workable data set to run through.
And I think both questions were also about resolution, and so that is still up to question. Yeah. In terms of what I've done with the microplastics, you can't really determine their shape, or they're very fuzzy, at least under a dissecting microscope. And from color itself, it was able to identify sand versus microplastics. So the hopes is that it will be able to do this also for the manta rays or the sargassum as well.
Actually, when you're talking about those disturbances and the clouds that happen a lot more frequent, and when you do that, maybe as an atmospheric scientist, I would be interested in that you just identify those clouds as a byproduct of this project. And if you can successfully remove those disturbances and identify the cloud and their occurrences, I think that's a huge success. And rather than risk, because now your target is probably 20% of the time.
Do our folks online have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question or comment. I think that the concept of using AI to do this is good. It seems like this is something that would work. Just the overall project. It's just the devil is going to be in the details, and kind of all the comments of everyone here. What are you using for the training set? Your quality control with the data that's coming in. Being able to really, I would advise to narrow the time frame and focus of what the model output you're looking for. As it is, if you've got a grand amount of data, it might be best to actually narrow it to specific areas that you can really vet and prove, and not just not take on the entire world. And otherwise, I think that would be the approach I would look at, is narrow quality control, nail down that training set, and again, just all those details.
I definitely agree with that. I think that we definitely do care about the quality of data that we put out, and so we do want to be realistic and not too ambitious. But so I do definitely think it's good to start small and see what can happen from there. So we'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
And we were gonna focus on the Gulf of Mexico just because that's NOAA's region, so we're doing it for them. And then if someone's got a massive supercomputer, they can apply it for something bigger. But we don't have that right now.
But well, my point is, like, the point for this is to make something they could then use for the Gulf of Mexico. So if there's a specific area that has really good pictures and is small, and then that vets the process, theoretically that then could get scaled up. So that's how I would approach this. I would approach this of a small area using their data, and then they can take the rest of the method, and then you don't have to worry about supercomputers and whatever else. You say, okay, this beach or this little zone, this is where we vetted this works.
What would you say about narrowing down then specifically on the flower gardens, which is where they have some animals tagged? Is that too big or is that too small in your?
No, I think it'd be good, because then also you got an area offshore that's not necessarily going to have a lot of sediment in the water. You might have really clear pictures. So pick the area that has the best data. That would be a small subset area, even just one of the flower garden regions, that not the whole thing. I would really recommend starting to, that way you narrow it down to quality data, that you remove all the compounding factors like sediment, weather, other stuff. And then once you get the training set done with that, because you'd still have enough data for training set, you'd still have enough data to validate. And then they all know what you do. They could just roll that up and apply that everywhere. So that, again, that's how I would approach this.
Dr. Ahmed?
I agree with Evan's idea, and based on our experience with machine learning applications, the key is the data, not the models. So probably playing with the data, doing pre-processing for the data, extracting specific important parameters or spectral component of the data is way important than like playing with the model itself, based on our experience. So I would probably suggest, in addition to probably work with a smaller area of better, or like a kind of a clean input data set. In addition to this, also play more with the input data set to extract parameters that could help you and kind of fine tune it for the model. So again, and kind of in a summary, playing with the data is more important than like trying to fix a model that is not working. So that's kind of an advice based on experience that we've recently had.
Thank you.
I believe Christian also had his hand raised online.
I did, but Remy actually answered the question, made the comment I was going to make. I was just going to, reply to Evan's comment that, we have the flower gardens are one area, and that's one of the areas that we definitely want to focus on. And then we do have a couple of other sort of discrete areas within the Gulf of Mexico that are areas that we know we have regular sightings and stuff, and those would be the areas that we would sort of focus on initially to spin this up and then apply it more widely. So yeah, Evan, you're absolutely correct in that, and that's sort of the plan moving forward.
So I think one of the things that might be challenging is finding that initial data set, half mile of manta rays live. Have you guys considered maybe, since manta rays have such a global wide range, have you guys considered maybe using manta ray images or maybe other kind of ocean or like ocean animal detecting software to use that data set? So maybe you find something on the other side of the globe where the water's nice and clear, but you can use those images to feed your data set, or you're going to try to train everything within the flower banks to then study that area.
I think that's definitely a good way, a great way to tackle that problem. My assumption or my idea right now is that we'll train it with the manta ray data and then go in and maybe during validation look at other stuff, because they do have stuff on whales and turtles. I think manta rays, part of this project, part of the importance is because manta rays don't get as much attention, I suppose. So I think it could be a good way to validate that.
Oh yeah, my inclination would be first to look at the water area that we'll be interested in based on my understanding of how neural networks and the model works. It's going to be connecting pixel by pixel regions, and so if the gradient for those pixels is slightly different because the water is clear, it might be able to work great for that detection in that specifically clear water. But if you move on to more greenish water, or different quality water, then your algorithm has to be retrained to identify that gradient difference.
Plus, the bulk of the work is going to be finding the manta rays from satellites before we have the model, and the tagging data in the flower gardens is great because you know exactly where it is, when it was, and it'll be easier to find a picture from there rather than just, trying your best to spot it from the satellite image.
I do not have any question, but related to your concern, Dr. Liu, excuse me. Related to your concern about the computer, I think we have high-performance computer here. I don't know, we can use it because I just started using this. Last week. I don't know, we can use it for those images you have many experience before. So.
I was one of the PI who bring that supercomputing facility to the campus. Of course, it's open to all the students who apply for the account for it. But my concern is if we are looking at like a centimeter scale of sampling, the size is huge. And when I look at the kilometer scale over just the United States, and it's in probably tens of billions, and you need to fit it into the memory to be able to do it. So you basically have to cut the image into the small pieces to be able to fit the data. So and everything is possible, but when you have a huge data set like that, there are a few things concerns everybody play with the big data set. First is the I/O. It's not just the how computer GPU can manipulate. It's just to put the data into the memory with the take long. That's a bad bottleneck. And so when you are training the image, if you already cut the monetary section, training the model is easy. But when you have a huge satellite image, right, figure out where is your interest spot. That is a huge amount. So,
and perhaps
we have the computing facility to deal with it. And I'm just from the application point of view, that is some experience working with the big data, and I can tell you what are the challenges.
Yes. And can you just transfer the data set from spatial to temporal data set to deal with this problem? And we have the longitude and latitude of each pixel and with the number of manta rays we have.
Yes, for most of the satellite images, especially for the high resolution satellite, you basically don't have very people webcasts yet. Probably you got one image in a couple of months, right? But when we're looking at Google Map images, they don't give you update until half years, right? So using the temporal difference of the satellite image would not be applicable, I would say. So basically, you have one shot.
And related to that, blue images or clothing with clothes, some images has clothes and covered by clothes that we cannot use those images. So can you use some radar images that are not affected by clothes or?
Yeah, there are many ways you can remove the cloud, at least using the lower resolution satellite image, we know where the clouds are. And every day you have a visible shadows from those things in the satellite. We are not really into the meter scale, but in the half kilometer or kilometer scale, we have the global satellite image of the cloud. There are identification for those. And you can use those to mask out at least the potential cloud areas, because most of the cloud are big.
Yes.
And then those are bigger features. If you look at the satellite image, any image, the bigger picture and the smaller picture, the manta rays, the much smaller features you are looking at. So first of all, you just remove all the big features, and then start moving into the smaller features and figure out what they are.
We can use those SAR images and pre-process them using that software. So just have it.
Yeah,
High resolution.
Yeah, for this problem, actually, there are more challenges because you haven't really think about the ocean waves. The shadow of the waves may look like a manta ray. So those will give you tons of false alarms, and if you treat the ocean as the calm surface all the time, of course it's easy.
Thank you so much for your valuable answers.
And so the way we were thinking of tackling, because you need to download the data before you can crop it out anyway, but we were thinking of asking Maxar to just give us like a little like cube over where there's a lot of sightings, maybe like a 2-5 year period, and that way we have less to cut out. And then set it to like if it's 75% cloud cover, get rid of it, and that makes it even smaller. And then the Normandy code accounts for waves, so it only accounts for things that aren't waves or naturally like a physical oceanic phenomenons that are bigger than a buoy, so that cuts out a lot more too, and then easier to go from there.
Any more questions? This was great interaction, great feedback. It's all a process, obviously, it's part of the learning. So, yes, nothing is as simple when you're out there in the field versus lab, right? But you are aware of this potential limitations or challenges. So going forward, you'll see, right, what the best way is to deal with them. So focusing on a smaller scale area, it's a very good idea.
There's some comments in the chat online, from John Quinlan. What is the spatial distribution of the tagging data? It would be nice if that had a small footprint as well. And then also, could you limit data collection to periods with specific seed date, maybe?
The region should be the flower garden banks, at least for that first part. Could you repeat the second part?
Could you limit data collection to periods with specific seed date? Maybe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the hopes.
We can take about a 5-6 minute break while we get the next presentation up and ready to go.
Thank you. But my current research interests are still pretty similar to my master's work. I usually think about things on the molecular scale. So I do a lot of metabolomics, whether it be traditional metabolomics in biological systems or metabolomics in environmental systems, just like in natural ecosystems like estuaries and such like that. You should try to think about what type of organic molecules are there, what that means in terms of the biology, but maybe with a little bit of an emphasis now too on different pollutants that are there, and overall biogeochemical cycling as well. And so I quickly wanted to introduce our primary community partner that we wanted to work with, the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries Program. They are a local nonprofit group, and they're kind of dedicated on restoring, protecting, and understanding some of our local natural resources. They are a partnership between public entities, private entities, and then a bunch of kind of recreational users or community kind of members. And within the CBBEP, they have a coastal bird program where they're trying to maintain these research projects to help understand and protect colonial and highly migratory shorebirds, which are pretty important in the Corpus Christi area.
So back in March, when CBBEP gave us their mini workshop, they sort of proposed this broad question or broad objective of the coastal bird program, which was how can we better manage and plan wetland areas and incentivize landowners to make the Texas coast a really strong link for these important shorebird migrations, because we know they're stopping here in these different fall and spring migrations, and we want to make sure that this area provides them the energy that they need to complete their migrations and complete their regular cycles. So if this is sort of a broad goal of the organization, we want this to be data-driven. And if we want to eventually inform wetland management practices and conservation efforts along the Texas coast, we want to do this based on a thorough assessment of the wetland availability in this area. So how much of this wetland is available for these migratory shorebirds, and how efficient is this area in providing them the energy that they need. And if we're going to complete a sort of assessment like this, we want to pay special attention to the seasonal availability, because we have these different seasonal migrations, right? You can be talking about fall or spring migrations, and you can also be looking at species-specific needs, such as what type of species are using the areas in the early season versus the late season. And depending on what time of the year it is, how available is this foraging habitat? Are the wetlands actually saturated and providing the energy that would be needed? And we also want to pay special attention to the specific classes of shorebird habitat. So it's not just going to be the bays and estuaries, but some of the different saturated soils, even further inland, that can be used by these migratory birds. So there's been some initiatives to sort of define these specific classes of habitat, which we're going to see later in the presentation. And if we are to complete some sort of assessment here, we want it to be thorough and address these different aspects of the habitat availability.
So one of the things that they presented at that mini workshop was this project by the Gulf Coast Joint Venture, where they use this Landsat or the satellite imagery to classify land types or land cover types. And so essentially they just have these images, maybe think of like a Google Earth image, and then from there they're able to say, okay, this is a saturated soil, this is a shallow water bay, this is a beach. And from that, they just were able to sum up all those different environments that are important for these migratory and non-migratory birds, and we're able to feed that into an energetic model based off of how much energy they think those areas could provide. Now, what we want to do is maybe make a slightly improved or make an improved model in a slightly more focused region. So they have the entire Gulf Coast region there. We want to kind of shift our focus towards the Laguna Madre and the Corpus Christi area. So include the coastal bend and a little bit south of us. And we want to see how can we improve this to better kind of break up and weight these different sources or these different habitats. So to do this, we propose using different data sets provided or hosted by Google Earth Engine. And so they have a great platform providing a bunch of different data models and data sources as well. And we are asking ourselves, can we use satellite imagery and supplement that with additional data, like geophysical data, that can help us understand these wetlands a little bit better? And we also ask ourselves, could these additional parameters that we add in on top of this imagery understand the temporal variability of these wetlands as well? And so we've started to explore a little bit as to what data sets are available. And so the first thing is going to be the different sources of imagery. We can have different different levels of resolution of imagery, different kind of periodicity of how often we get those imagery as well. And so we have a lot of things to consider there, but we have a few options that we're excited about. We also have a handful of geophysical data, whether that be geophysical data collected that is not imagery based, like different gas concentrations or reflectance or some other characteristics of the earth. But we also have geophysical data in the sense of people have built other models in terms of classifying land cover types, and can we work with previously developed tools to solve our problems is something we're thinking about. Additionally, there's climate and weather type of data. And so this can also be an important aspect in terms of how productive a habitat could be for these migratory bird systems. So if they need water and we don't have rain that year, maybe that habitat shouldn't be counted towards the available stuff. So we're considering that as well, and maybe additionally some water quality data.
So to get an overview of our project timeline, we're starting from scratch here at the very beginning. Not only are we not necessarily bird experts, but we're not AI machine learning experts. So that's what the next 6 months is going to do through our coursework in the Stages program, as well as our sort of independent study and collaboration with some of our community partners and our experts here on campus. But to start the project, we really just need to open up some initial discussion with our community partners primarily the Coastal Bend Basin Estuary Program, but we're going to be inviting any interested community partners to join us as well, because we need to know what has been done previously, what were some of the strengths and weaknesses of this Gulf Coast joint venture model, and what's still missing from that. Because what we sort of want to do is just focus down to a smaller area so that it's reasonable for us to accomplish in 6 months. But because we're working with a smaller data set, a smaller focus, can we find ways to improve that model by feeding it some of these other parameters? And we also need to talk to the wetland experts to see what sort of environmental data would actually be informative to categorize a wetland area or shorebird foraging habitat. So they might have better insight to what sort of geophysical or environmental data would be useful if we were able to obtain a data set that was adequate. So once we can sort of open up that initial discussion, we need to do some data exploration and see precisely what is available. If you go on Google Earth Engine, this hosting platform, it's sort of overwhelming how much data is there, but we plan to sort of start to narrow things down and pick out some candidate data sets and really explore that other imagery. What has been done so far was with the Landsat imagery, but some of these newer satellites have this advanced and improved technology. So it could be that we can supplement the current Landsat imagery with, some of those other satellites and some of those other remote sensing data. So we sort of want to go in and just start to pick out our candidate data sets. And perhaps there are additional community partners that could help us out on that front as well. And, the big bulk of this then is going to be the data download and the pre-processing, probably going to take up most of our time. Once we start figuring out the data that we want to use, how do we collect that? How do we sort that and store it in a way that is feasible and reasonable within our computing capacities? We don't have the precise details on, how we're going to build the models because we're still learning about these different types of models. But we do have a sort of good starting point if we can mimic what has been done by the Gulf Coast joint venture. And once we sort of have everything in line, then we're going to go through this process of running these models, training them, using our different wetland classifications that we are going to use to identify this shorebird habitat. We'll have to do some human interaction to come in and filter some of those misclassifications to make sure that the model is doing everything correctly. And then we can come up with some sort of final assessment, hopefully by end of November or December when we present our results. So although we are primarily taking this project idea that was presented by the Coastal Bend Basin Estuaries Program, we invite any of our community partners to join us, whether you want to be involved in these communications moving forward, if you want to, come in on some of our planning meetings and give us any insight that you might have, whether it be on the AI machine learning side or, just some of the wetland, shorebird, ecology, biology, and so forth. We see a lot of future directions for this project. So of course, it's just a stepping stone, but if it's successful, then perhaps there would be some species-specific assessments down the line where we can start to identify which species are the most vulnerable and sort of come up with a way to allocate the resources as necessary, right? Because some species might need more protection than others, and some areas might need more protection than others. So then, down the line, there's going to be hopefully some policy making that is informed by this. The landowner engagement where we can start to engage with the private entities who sort of manage these wetlands on their own and, give them better direction for how they're managing their resources. And as always, the community outreach, tourism, and recreation aspect is really important. It's spectacular that we get to see these great migrations along the Texas Gulf Coast, and the community should know about this. They should know where they can go see these migrations and see these birds who, are coming to this area just for a short amount of time and doing these really spectacular things. So we see a lot of area for others to get involved. And we really appreciated all of the seminars that we had throughout the semester. It was really great getting to see the different organizations. And, I think the general idea is that we're all concerned with the health,
of the bays and estuaries and protecting them. So that's about what we have. Again, my contact information and Justin's is down here as well. So if you are interested, then please let us know. And if you have any questions or criticisms, please share them with us now. Thank you. Yes.
So I was at the March presentation, and one thing that David used to mention that is a similar project that was done in California. The rice field. I'm thinking about that in contrast to what you're talking about. That sounds like a similar project, but it still seems like something we might want to look at, specifically look at them and figure out what they did and see if that helps give you sort of an initial push to the solution.
Yeah, of course. I definitely want to look into them because I looked at their website. And they're kind of already at the phase of engaging with the community and doing some of that. So I definitely want to see, you know, what have they done to make those assessments? That'll definitely be valuable. Yeah.
First thought I had was timelines and dishes. Which you will, having done some of this very similar work in classroom developments, without a whole lot of in-person ground truthing, just relying on the machine to do it, you get a lot of wrong answers. And so I just want to make sure that we sort of factor in. And I'm glad you really reduced the size of the project area. Just the transition between the different types of buildings is less dramatic as you go. You get one less hurdle to go over. I think you find out recommendations.
Thank you very much. I mean, and that's definitely something we've seen a lot in like the currently available like classification tools, right? I think I saw one that was like a really popular one, Dynamic World, where they're even like classifying some areas around here as like snow and ice. I know like that's probably not the case. So I'm hoping that we could, you know, by picking an area that we're familiar with, like just right in our backyards, we can kind of validate and improve the model a little bit that way too by helping identify stuff. But maybe we can use it as an excuse to get outside and kind of see how well it's performing.
I also want to say, just because I didn't mention it, and I don't know how it's going to be used yet, so this is going to be, you know, opened up more with our discussions with CBBEP. But their coastal bird program has started some of the weekly monitoring just in the field, doing some of that. I don't know how that data gets incorporated or if it will just inform us like, okay, maybe these habitat classes are looking more important. So why don't we narrow down even more and just try to classify those? There is some sort of on the ground monitoring happening. We just don't exactly know what they have and how they see that to be used yet. But maybe we shoot for the moon and land amongst the stars.
All right, I'm glad that you mentioned the data management would take a lot of effort. Actually, it's a huge, and you listed so many data sources. Don't, again, that almost like too ambitious to me. And so I would suggest you to start to immediately look for those data sets and try to cut it to the region you want and see how much time that would take. Because many of those downloading data procedures, you can put it in the background. And so let's start by downloading the data, see if how much you can get at the first. And also when you have a different data sources, you need to consider a little bit more about their resolution, how you match them, and also the temporal resolution. And for example, more this only observed at the noon time and the midnight, and the Landsat kind of monitoring at the morning time. Would that make a big difference for your retrieval? So some of those things probably not think ahead, and would that influence your model in the later time. But try to grab all the data as soon as possible so that you know what are the challenges. And that's my suggestion.
Thank you.
David Houston from CBBP has a comment in the chat. He said, very excited to work with you on this. I look forward to discussing in person at the breakout session this afternoon. Our monitoring data can be used to validate classifications and relate them to bird usage.
Great. Can't wait to see you. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
I do want to know something. So you are trying to find areas where they're more prone to have water and the habitats, okay, so we know that varies from year to year, like this year is really dry, what are the chances there's gonna be a lot of that around? And what do you expect that to be from precipitation, just accumulation, from precipitation? Or do you think it has something to do with the hydraulics of the area? So for instance, do you think it would be useful to use fresh running flows as an indicator that could potentially lead to more areas or less areas where birds can find the water?
That's definitely like an important consideration. So if that's something that we can make work, we would love to do that. So if we can include rain data, maybe some groundwater level data, right? Or just general type of stuff. Because some of the previous stuff, it seems like it was I mean, it's so variable, year by year, even month by month, day by day. And so if we can constrain that a little bit further, that would be the ultimate goal.
So if we're talking about wetlands, there are freshwater wetlands, there are saltwater wetlands. And it means that the tides, the water level is gonna have an impact, right?
Absolutely.
As well as the level of groundwater, which is the water table, which there isn't a lot of information out there on that. However, we did find good relationships between the stream flow discharge, like the level of stream flow, and with some lag time, the response of the water table. So that's why I mentioned freshwater flows, because they could be a surrogate of water table, which could result in the existence of freshwater wetlands. But hey, but
Thank you. Yeah.
And then you have your hand raised online.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I think that what you've set up a really good environmental science project where you've got the biology and then you've got the computer side and the data. Pretty much everything you said in your talk, I think is going to really set you up for success. And when you said, well, we don't know about this subject, we don't know about this item, but this is where we're going to find that out. And so I was really happy to kind of hear that through it. I think y'all are already kind of constraining, hey, this is the project, and doing that planning up front is gonna solve a lot of problems and save you a lot of time. So I just wanted to comment. I think that y'all are going in a really good direction. How your initial planning is going, and I think y'all are on the right stage.
Thanks, Evan. Really appreciate that.
I am not a wetland expert at all, but my background is in veterinary technology. So I was just telling everybody, my background is not in wetlands, but it's in veterinary technology. And so I just want you to put your thinking cap on just for a minute. I'm so sorry. This is just totally outside of scope. And so we're all talking about water table, water flow, and you're talking about characterizing wetlands, but have you guys considered how migration patterns of birds and how that is influencing the characterization of the wetlands? So foraging patterns, and so the avian flu, have you thought about how that maybe has impacted the plant species in the wetlands? Like how do you think that is maybe going to impact how you guys characterizing? Have you thought about maybe any of those impacts? That has had a huge impact on the veterinary industry. Like, we're still not even taking in many avian species into our clinics because of this. So I don't know if that maybe has been something that's thought about with your project, but the consequences of that and how that might influence your project.
Yeah, so It's a great point. I don't think we've thought about it too much in this initial planning stage, and that might be sort of further downstream, right? So the idea here might be, okay, if we can classify the amount of suitable wetland area, what sort of implication does that have for future research, right? There's already been a sort of energetic model that has been computed for sort of trying to estimate the amount of shorebird foraging habitat that would be necessary to support a growing bird population. And presumably you think a growing bird population means a healthy bird population, right? If the ecology is all in harmony, then you sort of have lower risk of disease. You have a higher expectation that those birds are going to survive and make their migrations. So I don't know if it will necessarily like inform our project objectives, but maybe the other way around, right? If we can prioritize identifying these areas, then someone can prioritize protecting them. And then if we protect them, what does that do for the overall health of these shorebird populations? So I think, you know, this is maybe a little more upstream than that, but, you know, it's all connected. So if we do something that promotes the health of this area, then hopefully in turn, you know, the veterinary technologist sees less of these occurrences of avian disease and whatnot. I think Dr. Ahmed had a question.
Yes, it's a kind of a comment. I think in one of your slides that you mentioned that you will do land cover, land use changes, and you listed Landsat and Modis data. There is a difference in resolution between those two data sets. And I think before going to this route, there is Landsat land use cover data set, global data set that are available for people to use. Probably you're looking for final spatial resolution in your case, or you're probably looking for more temporal resolution in your case. But that's probably something that you might need to consider to look at the available product first. Then based on this, you decide if you're planning to use more final, not more finer spatial resolution from Landsat or probably like Sentinel dataset. In addition, you might also need to think about if you're planning to collect those land cover, land use dataset as one shot, or you're also considering the temporal resolution or the temporal measurements for land cover, land use as function of time. That's also something that you probably need to keep in mind as well. But all in all, I like the idea. It's a very interesting project.
Thank you very much.
No, my question is on the energetics. Will you be looking at the fishery data? So a lot of these birds rely on that as a source of energy, or invertebrates, diversity and the amount of those. Will you be also incorporating that into your model, or is that something else further down the line?
That might be a little bit further down the line. So if it would, like, an ideal scenario is if we could have really good invertebrate data. A lot of these focus birds are going to be some smaller beak birds that might be leaning more towards an invertebrate diet, but they definitely, the fish is going to be important. The whole ecosystem is important for them, right? But I think for the energetic side, that would probably be a little bit more downstream.
Yeah, like say that you identified an area that was crucial, right? Say that we found some place where you're like, okay, the on the ground data says that all sorts of birds are using this area and it's consistently saturated. So it's just a really good candidate for, you know, foraging habitat. Then maybe down the line, okay, we've identified this area, let's allocate more resources to studying it in its entirety, right? Get some biologists out there to do the invertebrate assessments or the fish counts or whatever that is. But probably for the scope of what we're doing, just focusing on identifying those areas. Yes.
Same thing. I don't know so much about birds, but I have a couple of projects with Kim Withers, who actually would be a great person to pass this by. And what I've learned is that one of the actually important characteristics is just the length of their leg, right? Like they can only forage in waters that are shallow enough that they can, the length of their leg, and I think the length of their beak is another piece of it. So I don't know if that's a piece you could pull from the data that you'll be looking at, but just another thing to think about.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I get excited about is maybe linking some like water depth data to some of the bays and stuff, especially too with like tides, or I guess wind-driven tides and stuff like that as well. Like just thing right behind campus, oftentimes you have, you know, a good maybe too deep water for some of these shorebirds, but then other times, you know, maybe 1 week later, that whole sandbar is now a super hot spot for those. And so I think if we can try to incorporate those areas and get a good grasp of that too, I think that'll be really important for us.
And it was actually something that was mentioned in, we got some documents about this Gulf Coast joint venture model, so we were able to see a lot of what they've done. And actually some pretty detailed methodology, but it was something that they noted that, okay, one of their models had identified some area, but of that, what percentage of it is actually usable, because is it too deep for the birds to actually forage there? So, you know, maybe that ends up being the direction of our project, right? Because we're doing such a small area, can we add some sort of constraint that we can actually get that sort of depth information to, you know, answer a new question? So I think that'll probably come up in our breakout discussion of, you know, what is the priorities? If we're going to focus on a small area, maybe we can have a more focused question as well.
Okay, Evan has an additional comment in the chat. This project is very CMSS, apply different data sets and techniques from very different fields to develop answers. As a successful CMSS interdisciplinary grad, you will have to dance between learning enough about the subject data set to answer your questions and other caveats, but not go too far into research that you run out of time.
Also don't want to run out of time for our actual dissertation research. So we're learning all sorts of things. It's gonna be great.
Any other questions or comments? David?
Hi, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just one thing that I think we may want to, we'll have to hash it out, I guess, maybe this afternoon, is that these shorebirds use coastal, as in tidal habitats, as well as freshwater inland habitats. And the joint ventures assessment is really mainly focused on the freshwater, and that's some natural wetlands, but mostly that's managed units that are on private properties or wildlife refuges, and they're supplied by either groundwater wells or river authority canals, things like that. But the types of birds that use them are a little bit different, and then of course the variables that affect them are vastly different. They're very, very different. So I don't know the extent to which this almost, the coastal and freshwater almost seems like two projects to me. So you'll have to think about the scope of what you can realistically tackle in this amount of time. One other thing about the geography of the freshwater, which is inland, the more inland habitats, 1 or 2 counties inland, is that these shorebirds also utilize, some shorebirds also utilize burned areas, prescribed fire or wildfire. And that's something that's probably fairly easy to assess through aerial imagery, and the availability of that type of habitat across time. And also turf farms, oddly enough, which are discrete, property units. But the extent of flooding and harvest on those turf farms likely affects these birds. So just a couple other kind of caveats to think about.
Yeah, that kind of touches on some questions that were already brewing up for you. So we're really excited to have the chance to talk with you, just because, putting this project together, or the perspectives together, we already have a lot of questions about what they've done with the joint venture and stuff. So we'll definitely carry out those discussions later on.
Okay, and I've spoken with them too, including the person who developed that. They're very excited that you're doing this. This is actually kind of going to be like a pioneering step that towards something that they're looking forward to developing themselves. This will be helpful.
Great news. Great, thank you.
So I wanted to add, and I guess maybe a question to all the other professors. It seems counterintuitive, but this is just my experience. It's a lot easier to expand the scope of a project after you've started than to start really big and then start chopping things down. It seems really counterintuitive, but it's that's been my experience in working with data and working with projects. Like, because if you start big, then you've got this huge lofty goals and grants, and then you have to have really tough decisions when you cut down. Whereas if you start small, you can get things well defined, and it's a lot easier to make it bigger after that.
Maybe I want to look at what we have here as starting broad, but not necessarily big. We want to be realistic with the goals and the size of the project, but we're sort of throwing a broad, sort of umbrella over everything because we don't entirely know what the goals of the organization would be. So I see it more as we threw out, a sort of broad scope idea, but we're hoping to sort of narrow it down instead of trying to tackle something huge, just leaving our options open because we don't have all of the expertise yet. So maybe a sort of combination of both. We want to figure out early on something really defined and not too large.
Thank you, everybody. Great questions and discussion going on. We now have a 15-minute break, and so we will reconvene at 11:20.
Okay, so our third and final group presenting today is presenting on basically water quality and bacteria, working with TGLO as their primary. So I'll hand it over to them.
Hey, hello everyone, and good morning. Thank you for all coming for this workshop. The name of our project is titled Identifying Key Drivers of Enterococcus Levels in Texas Coastal Waters to Effectively Reduce Beach Advisories and Enhance Water Quality. So my name is Ifeanyi Imalaya. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a first-year PhD student in the Coastal and Maritime Science program. My advisor is Dr. Dorina Moglet. My research is designed to understand the impacts of extreme wet events on groundwater pollution in unincorporated Gulf Coast communities. Also, I'm working on understanding the occurrence of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, in the groundwaters of these counties.
Hi, my name is Quincy Walker, and I'm a master's student in the CMSS program. And Dr. Chantal Liu is my advisor. My background is actually in atmospheric science, and my research interests include using radar data to identify the properties of extreme weather events, specifically extreme precipitation events, as well as understanding the properties of storm systems that produce tornadoes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Button. I'm a first-year master's student in the Coastal Marine System Science program. My research focuses on groundwater pollution in combination with social science and the unincorporated communities in the Gulf Coast. And we're going to go on to our community partners. We're happy to say that our primary partner is TGLO. Thank you for being here, Jason. And then our secondary partners are the Texas Water Development Board, which Evan joined us remotely, Ingleside on the Bay Coastal Watch Association, thank you, Patrick, and Mission Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve.
Okay, just a bit of background. Few weeks ago, TGLO gave us an insight into the dynamics of bacterial loading and water quality in the Texas beaches, the Gulf Coast beaches. They mentioned how that they've discovered a bit of correlation between the bacterial loading, between levels of bacteria and increasing population and increasing sea levels. Also, a bit of concern they mentioned to us also was the fact that they observed
bacterial peaks in the month of March, June, July, and also September, which corresponds to the spring breaks and also some other public holidays we have in the US. So part of the questions we have to answer in this project entails what could be the reason apart from the spring break for having these high levels of bacteria in the study. Also, we intend to also look into the fact that what could be the reason why we're having some patterns, or what could be the insight we can draw from patterns of having the impact of land use on water quality. What also could be the reasons for these patterns, and what could be the drivers for these patterns along the Texas Gulf Coast beaches?
So with the problem, what our goal is to basically, how can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify any kind of temporal or spatial patterns with the Enterococcus levels in the Texas coast? And then with that said, can a machine learning or AI model then be used to find any correlations between the bacteria levels as well as with environmental factors? So is there any links between rainfall? Is there a link between proximity to a septic system? Is there a link between salinity or sea surface temperature? And then we also hope that our model can possibly identify what these key drivers are. It's maybe not an exact like one thing that's causing the levels, but just could we possibly find, you know, the point source of these bacteria getting into our waters? And then the ultimate goal behind this is, of course, for safety. So if we can reduce the amount of beach advisories, then like it's a net positive for everybody.
So the study area for this project is going to be based along the Texas coast, but we're going to narrow that down. There are, with TGLO and more Texas Beach Watch, 172 sites at 61 beaches, but we're mostly going to be focusing on that cluster kind of at the top between where that first red dot and then the other red dot kind of are. That's Matagorda, Brazoria, and Galveston County. And that's where we're going to be focusing on for this project.
So in terms of data sets, so of course the main data set we'd be using is of course the bacteria data, and that would be from the Texas Beach Watch. So each of those sites, they put out a measurement of what the bacteria level is along the beaches. And then the CW SS lab here has a lot of ongoing studies where they study the water quality as well as bacteria studies in their labs. And so we aim to use some of their data to find any cross correlation between the two. And then we also aim to explore the linkage between precipitation and the bacteria levels in the water. And so on the figure on the left is just like a proof of concept image. So we use a GPM satellite precipitation radar, and this is just like a monthly distribution of when we see these extreme rain events along the Texas coastline. And one thing of note is, so the months of interest, of course, being March, June, July, and September. And you can see that in March and July specifically, the levels are, in terms of the amount of extreme rain events identified by the satellite, are fairly low. And so it's possibly that those spikes in bacteria could be from spring breakers, or it could be from the 4th of July. But the other 2 months, being June and September, have the highest amount of extreme rain events. And so it's possible that maybe some of these events could be linked to rainfall in these specific months. And then we also aim to use coastal infrastructure data, so the locations of septic systems. Then we also aim to use the wastewater treatment plant discharge data. And then we also plan to use the coastal hotel locations. And so why hotels could be used in this data set is because when Texas Yellow came and gave their presentation, they identified that there's possibly a linkage between hotel occupancy and bacteria counts. And so possibly we can identify a linkage between the proximity of the test sites with hotel locations could be a possible avenue to explore. And then in terms of other data sets, we have the Texas Water Development Board freshwater inflow model. They also have the Texas Mesonet data for ground-based water data. Then we have the USGS stream flow and the TCEQ water data that has the turbidity and salinity, sea surface temperature, and et cetera.
Okay, so in terms of the timeline for our project, we are looking at having to acquire our data within the months of May and June and proceed to work on the data reduction, data transformation, data validation, and the whole process that has to do with data throughout the month of July to November. We do not have like expertise, like experience in all these things, but we hope that the summer course we are taking would give us we imbue us with the skills and techniques to be able to handle this challenge. And then by December, we intend to complete our projects and present to you in the big workshop.
And then we just like to thank Stages, NSF, and then TGLO for giving us this opportunity to work with the water quality and the bacteria data. Thank you.
The first question, did you include your meteorological weather condition?
We don't have it mentioned here, but that could be a specific avenue to look at. We did plan on using sea surface temperature data, and maybe that could be identified by using like the ERA5 data set or some other satellite data source to identify some other meteorological things. And in terms of precipitation, I mentioned I didn't say it out loud, but the MRMS product uses the ground-based radar from like the National Weather Service. And so we could get some meteorological information from these sources as well.
Thank you.
That's not a question, just comment, and it has to do with the different data sources and the frequency of data collection. You guys have thought about this, but if you're looking specifically at just a couple of months over the year, how well is that going to measure some of these data collection programs and reporting to that situation and have that impact?
Thank you. Or we can answer or comment.
An answer to that, right? Did you mention just a few months of the year? Is that what the question was, or the comment?
Well, they're looking at this month and this month, the tie effectively wanted to try to tie it to a particular reason. If the data collection frequency touches one problem.
Yeah.
That's most of that. The data frequencies to the data that may not match very well.
I see. So you're referring to the TCQ data, not because there is plenty of data dropped every month for the bacteria. It could be potentially that a connection can be made just for those times when the TCQ data are available, given that it's a long data set.
I'm not really sure I should even talk about this, because I don't want it to. During the original presentation, there was a really great mention about source tracking and how it hadn't apparently helped them determining the point source. But it might still be useful not to incorporate it into the model, but just to get a quick look at what's already been done there to see if it can help eliminate it.
Thank you.
You guys looked at what has been done, right? Right, you did.
Yeah.
That's what you started. Yes. It hasn't, a lot hasn't been done, but they looked at the studies that were performed already.
Yeah, we did. We looked at the studies that TGLO did in collaboration with other universities where they had to understand the dynamics of this bacterial loading and sea level rising in the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Corpus Christi Bay, I guess it's Cole Park is one of the worst bays or worst beaches in all of Texas. I'm not sure how other beaches in our area look, but you're looking specifically up the coast, not anything in Corpus Christi area. I just want to know why.
I guess rather than just looking at only Corpus Christi Bay, considering that the Texas Beach Watch does have test sites along the entire coast, we were hoping to get a more robust understanding of what's going on in the entire coastline rather than just one specific area. But that could be one avenue to look into for the future, is looking at very specific spots. Like in the map shown earlier, Matagorda Bay was a particular hot spot for bacteria counts. And so that could be a possible case study we can use in the future, and looking at the Cole Park measurements as well. Thank you.
Evan?
Yeah, I would highly recommend y'all looking into the NOAA engulfs model for water velocity, and in a way of not necessarily do you have to download all of that data and check it all through or process it, but almost as a way of informing you and also having, you know, some kind of sanity check. So an example, that this is sort of a question we've been asked before, our group is, hey, something landed on this beach, or this occurred, could this possibly occur? And when you look up one of these models, you can find out very quickly, well, the currents are, yes, moving things from the beach, from say a ship channel or some spill, otherwise not. So the example would be, I put a page in the chat. So NOAA has these subdomains that actually print a picture with the velocities of that data set. So an example would be Corpus. So before they were talking about Corpus and Cole Park. So for example, the currents today, they're all moving up from the south. So if something was going to land there, if it's not, you know, some deposition that occurred directly on the site, then you would be looking at a contaminant or something from the south, for example, not from the ship channel. So anyway, I just saying, like, I think to do this project, you're gonna have to look at velocities in some way of informing you that this can or can't have happened at that spot from some other location.
Thank you. We'll take a look at the data set.
Hey, thanks for the great presentation. So you've narrowed it down to 3 counties. Are you thinking about breaking down and looking at just specific areas within those counties, or addressing all the sites within Matagorda, Brazoria, and Galveston?
With peaks in certain counties, it would be best to break them up into specific ones. And just in kind of regards to where that cluster is and everything, that would be to look at it as a whole, at like kind of like the end goal would be the best. But to see the exact ones, I remember when you kind of told us the whole kind of story about where these peaks are occurring and why are certain areas with septic leakage not having these high amounts of bacteria in them. So to be able to analyze them separately and then put them together would be best.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I was just curious in approaching this, because with all the work done to date, and we had some insights and maybe we have developed, eliminated some possibilities, but we can talk later about maybe trying to cherry pick some sites where maybe some of the variables can be reduced or eliminated, just because there's thousands of confounding issues impacting each of the water quality results.
Yeah, that would be great.
But for applying machine learning techniques, it's best if they combined, because it's a larger data set and more to train on and then test on. So yeah, constraining each one of those locations with the different variables that might be impacting its best. But when looking overall, trying to identify patterns by lot, like this machine learning, or they require larger data sets to perform better. So ideally, we can do that, but that's something to test if machine learning is going to work for this.
I would say, if you can put all the data together for all the stations and you get a time series of the water quality change, combined with all the time series of all the parameters, and for each station, you can do a model by itself and analyzing the relative importance of the parameter coming out. Then that way you can figure out which factor plays the most important role for each station. Maybe it's separate. But if again, the most difficult part is prepare the data, put everything together before you train the model. So that's a huge effort. But once you can do it, so hallelujah. It's that. All right.
Any other questions?
Yes, I wanted to see if anybody else other than working with Jason and Gino from other community partners would be interested in have feedback and input, like local knowledge is also very important. Please let us know, not for just for this project, but for the other two projects, even if they didn't mention in their presentations, specifically your who you're representing, you were welcome you and actually encouraging you to think about and how we can. Thank you. If we don't have anything else before lunch, I did wanted to say something that I should have mentioned this morning, but I want us to thank Patrick for his gift this past year. So we have a Patrick and Julie and I annual scholarship that begins this year. It's $11,000. That is okay. So we the scholarship, Patrick and Julie and I annual scholarship. The purpose is the scholarship is awarded and intended to assist the deserving full-time graduate student who is pursuing the Stages program within the College of Science at A&M Corpus Christi. And so $11,000 that will go to a Stages fellow that is enrolled in the, well, we already have a certificate that we're going to start awarding our trainees as they finish their program, but also we have this now in our curriculum, so we'll continue doing so, and hopefully we'll have enough interest that the scholarship will be awarded to one of those students going through the program. So I really want to thank Patrick for starting this and to let everybody else know that this is something that we are very interested in helping to support this program past the funding, because that will end in a year and a half. But we'd like to continue this as we see this is a great opportunity to bring together stakeholder communities with researchers and the students to be exposed to this kind of experiences. I think it's a great opportunity. So if you know anybody that wants to donate to our program, please send it our way. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
If there are no further questions or comments for our third group, we have some break for lunch. Not quite set up yet. And reconvene at 1 o'clock for breakout sessions.
Okay, everybody, it's 2 minutes to 1, so you can start heading to the breakout sessions. The manta ray project is upstairs, 3rd floor island room. So as you come off the elevators, it's going to be the first conference room on your left. And then we have the shorebirds group here in the room towards the back. And we have the water quality and bacteria up at the front of the room. For those joining us remotely, you should be able to join the breakout room of your choice. And you can come and go if you want to visit other rooms also. And the breakout rooms are open. Yes. On at least one of them. Okay, it looks like all of our groups have finished up or wrapping up their breakout sessions. So we're gonna move into our reporting out from each group. So if group 1 can come up front, and in your report outs, please, summarize your conversation and your plan for the next few weeks before the data blitz starts. It's right here.
Hey everyone, so thank you so much again to our stakeholders at NOAA Fisheries for helping us have what I thought was a really great and productive conversation. So we took a lot of notes, and so we do have a clear roadmap for what we're going to do. So I'll kind of just briefly touch on, and Mandy and Remy can also add to the stuff that we talked about. So first off, they have provided us with a couple of important links on accessing data and just getting some background information. We kind of asked them about some roadblocks we might encounter and recommendations they had. So they did agree that some of the things the faculty members mentioned during our initial presentation of keeping a small scope would be a thing of value and not, getting too ambitious. So that's something that we will definitely do. They also said that it'll still be kind of like finding these pictures of the manta rays might still feel like finding needles in different haystacks, but at least if we can identify a haystack, that makes things easier. So they gave us a couple of recommendations. So we're probably going to look at Cape Canaveral actually over the flower garden banks, because we might have a better resolution of that satellite imagery. Before I move on, did you guys want to add anything to that?
Because it's closer to the coast.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so and also because it's closer to the coast. Yes, yes, there's more satellite imagery. So we might still use the east and west flower garden banks, but we're gonna go look at Cape Canaveral first just to see what we can glean from that. And then in terms of data acquisition, we will have, there are some constraints on accessing Maxar data, but we'll kind of troubleshoot that and see what happens there. But we do have other things like acoustic tags, but there's only one, it seems. Tracking data, which may not be the most beneficial because there are the satellite tags are not always the most accurate, but what was recommended to us by Dr. Farmer was to maybe start with looking at the aerial observations, because there's dates, like they're time stamped, so that can give us a better sense of maybe where the manta rays are and how they're moving along. And then we kind of touched on the communication aspect of things, and so in terms of progress meetings, we decided that we'll do meetings once every 2 weeks during the summer when we're still kind of teasing apart the data and have probably a lot of the bulk of our questions. And then once we fall into the fall semester and ideally have a better flow of what we need to do, we can meet once a month, but things can change, I'm sure. And so we have a way to contact them, and then they said that they'll schedule, regular meetings. And so we have that set up, and we'll kind of touch base with them on Friday. After we've done, so we're also going to start on our Python micro credentials tomorrow. And so we'll touch base with them on Friday. And then lastly, this is Remy's question for them actually. And he asked if they would like detailed SOPs for the pipeline code, which they said would be helpful, and I'm sure that will benefit us. So we'll go ahead and make sure that they have that, and we'll put the code in GitHub. And yeah, that's what I got. You guys got anything to add?
But they sent us the GitHub.
Yes, thank you. They sent us the GitHub code for looking at the anomalies. And yeah, and we have our notes typed up already in the deliverable that you wanted in. And we've already have a shared folder that I made on OneDrive where we can start sharing notes and research papers and anything we come across, and we'll probably use something like Colab or that is something yet to be figured out, but we do have a plan, so we're nervous but excited. I'm nervous but excited, I should say. Yeah.
You're nervous, very excited.
I maybe I know I'm a little scared, but I'm also excited. I can speak for myself.
Okay, thank you, group one. Group two, Shorebirds.
Okay, so I think we had a pretty productive conversation, and it was great having a few people talk and stop with us, especially like Dr. Lou. But we think we've narrowed down a little bit of what we want to do, what our goals are. And so we were informed of some different data that we can work with that can kind of help drive, I guess, our workflow, to where we have essentially these monitored watersheds with weekly information like counts of birds, maybe what that land was used for beforehand, afterhand, some water level data as well. And so we think we're going to kind of tailor the project to looking at trends in those managed watersheds, finding similar characteristics in the non-managed watersheds, just things in Corpus Christi or Laguna Madre area, seeing what type of those watersheds are the most productive or the most important habitats for these shorebirds, then be able to quantify how much do we have in the unmanaged systems to get an idea of what we have to offer and what areas might be the most important. Also gained a good number of contacts for experts or people that have maybe done some similar things. So we're excited to kind of reach out and see what type of help we can get there.
Yeah, it looks like we're gonna sort of start in a couple weeks with trying to have a meeting with some of these other contacts, people who are doing similar work or might have insights to the project as we actually try to refine and finalize this. Some of those folks, including ourselves, are going on some business related trips at the end of May. So we're gonna try to meet in the next week or two to sort of have that refinement meeting and finalize our final sort of objectives. To sort of summarize what Justin was saying, we do have this on the ground bird monitoring data that's going to sort of guide the areas that we look at and help us identify which types of habitats and which characteristics those habitats have that are actually the most useful, and seeing from that area where the monitoring is happening, can we extrapolate and find regions that also have those characteristics. We also learned about birds using these burned areas, whether they be controlled burns or natural fires. Apparently sort of as soon as these areas are being burned, the birds are moving in and foraging in those areas. So we're probably going to try to incorporate some of that data as well. But again, we're sort of going to finalize this in the next couple weeks, and it sounds like we have some more people on board to join us. So we're really excited to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, group two. Group three, water quality and bacteria.
Oops. All right, so we had a very detailed discussion with Jason, representative from TGLO, and they were able to nail down some things to do. So first off, we'll be getting some data from them in a couple of weeks. Would have to collect data for the bacteria over 14 years gap, and also would have to work. We mentioned actually Dr. Montana gave us some insights on what to do with this data in order to identify some patterns in this bacterial analysis, such as having to do multivariate analysis and also categorical analysis, just to be able to identify key patterns that would help us make some decision along the line.
In terms of data discussion, we did talk about different sources of data that we could possibly use that we didn't really consider. And so I forgot his name. Evan. Yes, he mentioned using like a stream flow model to possibly eliminate some noise. And so I guess we can say, like, we know that on a certain day the flow was coming from the south, and so we can say that the contaminant probably didn't come from like a location on the east or a location from the north. And then he also linked us an ArcGIS map that we is connected to Texas GLO, and it has the site locations for water wells and pipelines and wastewater treatment plants along the coastline. And so we're actually drafting up an email to request that data right now. So and in terms for the bird group, they actually had wetland indicators on the map too, so maybe that could be of use to y'all as well. So yeah, we can share the link with you as well, but it's the ArcGIS map, and then to request the data, it's just a matter of sending an email. But yeah.
I guess some more recent things that we're gonna have to focus on is over those 14 years and everything being spread across the Texas coast, the data is separated with 5 different bacteria labs that it comes from. So we're gonna have to make sure that all of them are in the same format from the 5 labs. And then Jason informed us that they do an A and a B sample while they're out there. So we also need to decide as a group if we want to average between the A's and the B's or just use the A's. So that'll be the most recent stuff that we'll deal with. And then narrowing down and separating the locations. So from there, with all the sites that we have to choose from, going with the bays, just everything that's on the beaches and the barrier islands, and separating them by those types of environments in order to make sure that they are the most similar when it comes to how they're affected and what could be affecting them, whether it be precipitation, septic leakage, or just other environmental qualities. But that's our plan.
I'd like to thank everybody for the great discussion and conversations that were had today. We are really proud of our trainees. They've been putting a lot of effort into looking into each of the projects that were presented by our partners. We'd like to, thank our partners for agreeing to work with us and work with cohort 2. The next steps for our trainees, starting in June, they go into the Big Data Blitz course where they will hopefully be going in, having taken their micro-credentials already, which are designed to improve their Python coding literacy. There's additional ones they can do if they want to work in R. So over the summer, they will work on their coding literacy. They will also be ingesting and pre-processing all the data for their projects, so that in the fall, they go into the environmental forecasting class with data sets that are ready for analysis. And they'll learn about the AI and machine learning techniques that they can apply and work on developing those models. Hopefully you've all had a chance, it sounds like you did, to discuss your communication plans, and regular reporting periods. So, we look forward to hearing those progress reports from our trainees. And with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Merlet to give some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, everyone. Our trainees, our partners, our faculty advisors, our support people, for being here today and for putting so much of your time and energy in this. I know I'm not the one who's going to do the work, right? And I know this is gonna be a lot. So I want to remind you to talk to us. Don't let this become a burden. Don't let it stress you out where you might, just disappear or, go down a path that we don't want to see happening. So remember to come talk to us. We want this to work, but of course we want it to work well to where it's a positive opportunity, right? It's you're learning, but you're learning and other things are just coming off the schedule because you can't take. Again, don't let it become a problem. Just remember, we're here and we're open and we can talk about it. Right, Laura? And so I just want to say I'm so happy to work with you all because you're such a great group to work with. Where I can be myself and hopefully you can be yourself. And that is great, because that communication, I think so far we can see it went great. We had a great event today and I think we got very far already. Everyone kind of getting a good idea of what they can do, what they want to do, and going forward with a positive attitude and having the right connections. I think that's very important. So, but there are others out there probably that you can talk to, so don't forget. There are other faculty on this campus that are experts on whatever you chose to do. So I could think of bird people, right? I can think of fish people, I can think of bacteria and rainfall and other sorts of experts that we have on campus, and that would just expand your circle, right? You learn more from those that know and maybe bring up other ideas that make your life easier, actually, not more complicated. So I know there was something else that I want to say, but I'll remember and tell you. Just thank you for making time to be here, to our community partners. And again, if you remember anything, you want to send their way or our way, just please do it. And just thank you, everyone online too.
Thank you, Dr. Merlet, for those comments. And with that, we are ready to adjourn for the day.
Very nice job, everybody. Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone. Great to see y'all.